Hey, it's Mike from the Run Testers. In this video, we're going to be talking about Fitbit, specifically the Fitbit Sense. So this is Fitbit's health watch. Now, when they're talking about health watch, it's about kind of monitoring those kind of more serious health metrics, so things like heart rate or medical grade kind of heart rate, body temperature, and even kind of delving a bit more into your stress. Now, it still does operate like a smartwatch, so you're getting everything that you'll get in its Versa smartwatch in this watch as well. That does include things that make it potentially a really kind of decent running watch. Myself and Nick been able to spend some time with this watch over the last couple of months, and we kind of wanted to share our thoughts on how it gets on as a running watch and whether you should actually buy it. So yeah, here's our take on the Fitbit Sense. Okay, so before we get into running performance, let's talk a little bit about the features, and the features that really kind of will make sense or appeal to runners, obviously. Now, you're getting built-in GPS, which is something that you didn't get on watches outside of the Fitbit Ionic, which was Fitbit's first smartwatch. Now, they're kind of moving away from that Ionic, that debut device, to its Versa and its Sense. So the Versa 3, which also launched with the Sense, also has built-in GPS. So you've got the built-in GPS, so you don't have to rely so much on your phone anymore to kind of map your outdoor runs. So of the GPS, you've got a new heart rate monitor. So you've got Fitbit's new Pure Pulse 2.0 sensor technology, essentially. What that means is you've got a wider surface area where it's taking that reading, kind of light reading from your wrist. And the idea is that you can get more accurate data, whether that be kind of daily data or kind of when you're exercising. Now with that, it brings a few kind of features that are quite interesting. So something that we've seen before on the Fitbit Charge 4, which is their workout intensity map. So what that will do is it will overlay your heart rate during your kind of route to see where you've kind of worked hardest and where you haven't worked hardest. And you've got the other things that you've had there with Fitbit before. So you've got a treadmill running mode, you've got the outdoor running mode. So some pretty basic things. Battery life, Fitbit hasn't really spoken about GPS battery life, but you're getting up to 6 days when you're not using the always on display mode. You've also now got a fast charge kind of support. So what that means is you can put this on the charge for like 10 to 12 minutes and it will essentially give you a day's use basically, which is pretty good. So yeah, those are the kind of key things in terms of the features, and I think kind of from a running perspective. So in terms of kind of key design highlights, you've got a stainless steel case as opposed to the aluminium one that you have on the Versa 3. You've now got these bands which are much easier to take off. You kind of click at the back here, these two buttons, and you can kind of swap them out for Fitbit's official straps or third-party ones. You've still got this kind of really bright AMOLED screen, which can be set to always on mode, which will obviously impact on the battery life. It's a bit bigger, it's a bit higher resolution compared to the Versa 2 from last year. So overall, very similar to the Versa 2. It's a kind of square, kind of stumpier looking screen in comparison to the kind of longer screen you get on an Apple Watch. But generally, kind of a nice, light, comfortable watch, a really strong screen. And yeah, those are the kind of key design highlights on the Fitbit Sense. So one design thing we have to talk about is the fact that Fitbit does not include any physical buttons. What they're doing instead is they're building a button essentially inside of the case. So when you squeeze the side of the case, that will turn on the screen, get you into other menus. Now, what we found is it can be quite unresponsive at times. So that could just be generally during the day. Out running, if you quickly need to kind of tap to open the screen, or instead of actually tapping on the screen, it's not very responsive. Now, the good thing is that you're not massively reliant on that feature. Ultimately though, if you like the idea of physical buttons when you're running, this doesn't have it, and what they put in as an alternative doesn't work really well for us. So when you get into the app, you can see a map of your run, you can see your splits, you can see a breakdown of heart rate, and then also kind of how it contributes, or that run contributed to your daily activity. Obviously your data can live in Fitbit, and you can also send it over to services like Strava. So if you wanted something or an option that does that, this watch will do it, and it does it kind of very effectively and efficiently. In terms of that data, it's a decent amount of information there that you can kind of dig in a little bit deeper, but you're definitely not getting the kind of wealth of insights and metrics that you'll get from a Polar or a Garmin or a Cinto or something equivalent. It's definitely still, for us, the running or the exercise tracking is still very much a little bit secondary in terms of the daily activity tracking and some of the other things that a Fitbit can do, and that doesn't really change on the Fitbit Sense. Okay, so obviously let's talk about running performance. How did you get on with the Sense in your running time?
I won't lie, I've not enjoyed running with the Sense. The design I really don't like for a start. I find it very unresponsive during runs and during anything when I want to interact with this. I find I have to tap this sensor about 3 times, by which point it's missed the first one, registered the second one, registered the third one, so I've paused, gone again. That annoyed me quite a lot. I found that basically the always-on screen on this isn't quite bright enough to see my stats when I'm running, so I have to turn to wake the screen anyway to actually see stuff clearly, at which point it might as well be a raise to wake screen. Yeah. Like the Apple Watch is always on screen, I can see my stats very clearly on. And then the way it's laid out, you have a stat on the top and a stat on the bottom, and then in the middle you have one you can flick through, but flicking through this touchscreen, again, isn't the most responsive, I don't think. I find very hard to do on the run. So basically I've not been a fan. In terms of accuracy, GPS has been fine. Been pretty much spot on actually for me. The heart rate on everything I've done with this, exercise-wise, has been an absolute horror show, to the point where I think you can almost disregard what I'm saying, because you've not hit that bad. And I literally, it's not been right for a single bit of exercise I've done, where it's a workout, like a strength thing, a yoga thing, running or cycling. It's been completely wrong. So I almost feel like I can't comment because it's been so bad. It can't be what it's like for everyone, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for me, so obviously the big thing is that GPS is on here now. That's the big deal. Now that was only on the Ionic.
Yeah.
And now it's on here, and the Ionic now they've kind of essentially retired. The GPS for me, was generally fine. It was always a little bit short. Okay. I was running with the 4runner 745, and it was always a little bit short on the distance. It wasn't hugely inaccurate, but it was enough to kind of make me think, it's not quite there. And the heart rate generally was okay for me. I thought the max and the average heart rate for running. I did some kind of indoor rowing stuff, and it was generally fine. You still do have that issue when you get some random spikes with and then generally you get some maximum kind of heart rate readings which didn't quite seem right, maybe 4 or 5 above what a chest strap I would get from a chest strap sensor. I think the other thing you were saying, the raise to wake gesture is not very good, I don't think. No. So if I don't use the always on display to kind of preserve the battery life, because that obviously does impact on the battery life. And I found it wasn't very reactive or responsive, especially if you compare it to something like the Apple Watch or even some other smartwatches, to be honest. And then just the way that the data is displayed, the real-time stuff that you get. So you can't customize it. It's one metric, a screen. It's not a great running experience. You've got nothing in terms of structured training or anything like that. No, it doesn't. That's not what you're going to get from the Sense from that.
It's really pitched at the kind of casual runner. I will say GPS is now, before you had connected GPS, which was always really inaccurate for me, and also took forever to lock on to find my phone. This has been very fast to find a GPS connection, and it has been more accurate. Yeah. But like I say, it's a basic. It's obviously basic casual runners. You can kind of choose the stats. You can swipe through, but there's a lot of weird stuff on there, and it's not easy to do that. So it's a classic Fitbit thing. It's not it's not really aimed at particularly serious runners, but at the same time, the fact that the design is so like poor for me. Like this button panel thing is very poor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with
good.
you. That button, I mean, it's a weird decision. They did this on their fitness trackers. I think they did it on the Spy HL. They removed the button, and it actually works on a slimmer device. But on here, it just did not work for me. I'd find myself repeatedly pressing it to kind of access things.
Yeah.
And I mean, if they're going to do this watch again, I would not do that, or just make it better, because it's pretty bad in terms of design decision.
Yeah, but I mean, fair. Half the runs I've done with this, I thought I'd stopped, and I hadn't. And I just had some seconds at the end where the button hadn't worked, and I was ready to lose my mind with rage.
I think ultimately, I think the running aspect of this watch is really about how does it contribute to your day overall. And I think you see that when you go into the data in the Fitbit app. It's really about, it will give you the kind of mapping from the GPS, it will give you your metrics, those kind of basic metrics that it does. But ultimately, it's more about saying, well, this is how much activity you've done and how it contributes to the day. And I think that's the real kind of push from Fitbit.
100%. Like, this is not a running watch. This is like your health watch. You're going to get better running performance from a £100 like dedicated running watch. So it's really, if whether you want all the other stuff and you're just a casual runner, this will probably be okay, I guess.
Yeah.
So in terms of battery life, I think myself and Nick have had very similar experiences, in the sense that if you're going out for maybe half an hour, you can probably see as much as 10 to 12% off the battery in terms of drop off. Now, if you take a similar watch from Garmin or Polar, or even something like an Amazfit, you're seeing a couple of percent in terms of drop off. So if you're hoping to run regularly with this during the week, you're probably going to be charging it maybe after 4 or 5 days. If you have the always on display, which knocks the battery life down to maybe 2 or 3 days, and your GPS, kind of using the GPS, you're going to see a bit more of a drop off in terms of the battery and how regularly you're charging. Now, you do have that quick charge feature, which does work really well, and love to see that in some other watches that we've been using. It works really effectively. Say 10-15 minutes on the charge, you can probably get a day, maybe a bit more out of your watch off a short period of charge. But ultimately, from run tracking, battery life does drop off quite noticeably, and I think most people are going to see that when they run with it. So we thought we'd talk about the Fitbit Versa 3 and how that kind of compares to the Sense. Now, they are two watches launched together. They're very similar in look. We've talked a little bit about the design in terms of the case materials that are used, and are slightly different. Essentially, you're getting a very similar looking watch, same in terms of the straps. From a kind of sports tracking perspective and run tracking, it's pretty much identical, and kind of gave us and generated, for me, identical kind of results in terms of the GPS and in terms of the heart rate monitoring, in terms of the battery drop off from running. The key things you're really kind of missing from the Versa 3 that you don't get in the Sense are some of the extra health sensors or health insights. So a thing like body temperature tracking, which happens in sleep. Some just kind of additional metrics you'll get through Fitbit's premium service, which you would have to pay on top to access. So essentially very similar watches. From a run tracking perspective, very similar. I don't think you're really going to notice that much difference between the two watches. Okay, so should you buy the Fitbit Sense? Now, if you're hoping this is going to be a great running watch and you're going to get a great running watch experience, it's not quite there. I think in terms of actually using it during a run, in terms of the data you're getting, it's not fantastic, and it's kind of what we've seen from kind of Fitbit's devices in general anyway, and it doesn't really change with the Sense. If you're looking for a smartwatch and a health watch, you're paying a bit more attention to your health, and you're looking around the same price, you can look at something like the Apple Watch SE, you can look at the Apple Watch Series 3 for a kind of more solid kind of run tracking experience from a smartwatch. And that's obviously, if you've got an iPhone. If you've got an Android and you're looking for an Android option, we'd probably say look at something from Garmin's range, which you can get a bit more reliable sports tracking. So something like the Venue, maybe even the Venue SQ, which is a bit cheaper. Those options are going to give you a better mix of the smartwatch and crucially the run tracking, which on the Fitbit Sense it's not fantastic. It's a bit more about kind of how your running contributes to your overall kind of daily activity, and if you need a bit more in terms of digging into your data, this is probably not the one for you. If you want something that's, you know, there's less emphasis on the running, and a bit more in terms of the activity tracking and smartwatch kind of features, it's a decent enough watch. But from a running perspective, not one we'd probably recommend right now. And it's, you know, how we felt about Fitbit watches and trackers in general from a kind of running perspective. So yeah, that's our take on the Fitbit Sense. Obviously, if you've got any questions on our testing, how we got on, if there's anything you think we've missed, let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hit the bell to find out about our next videos, and we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.